Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're putting together my priority TBR, which is something I didn't do in 2025. I decided to kind of break things out and make more specific lists, and I think I overwhelmed myself a little bit with lists. So we're going to try and not do that in 2026, and instead I wanted to create a priority TBR of things that I really want to make sure don't languish on my shelves in the coming year. So I've divided it into three categories, 4 books each, that I think are going to help me achieve some of my sort of unofficial goals that I have just kind of in the back of my mind. So our 3 categories are sequels that will allow me to complete a series, so the last book in a series. I had quite a few to pick from, so I've chosen the 4 I felt most strongly about continuing. I also have a category that's books that I bought in 2025 or received in 2025, and I'm afraid that if I don't go ahead and pick them up, they might end up languishing on my shelves because I'm either intimidated to pick them up or I'm afraid they're not going to live up to my expectations, and I want to just kind of break through that and not let that stop me from reading them. And then the final category is actually just a random backlist category. I have a huge number of owned books, and I've been working on reading down my own TBR. So for that last section, I just drew randomly 4 books out of my little bag here that has everything that was on my TBR prior to the start of 2025. And just randomly drew 4 books from there to try and prioritize some things that I probably forgot that I own. So, starting with our sequels to end a series, first things first, I have Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. I just read Before They Are Hanged and absolutely loved it, but I let a lot of time pass between when I read The Blade itself and when I read Before They Are Hanged, and I don't want to do the same thing between Before They Were Hanged and Last Argument of Kings. So I want to go ahead and try and prioritize this one, get to it soon. Also because that will allow me to continue on with the rest of the First Law universe, which is something I'd really like to do in 2026. Next up, we have His Mortal Demise by Vanessa Lee. This is the second half of the Last Bloodcarver duology, which was a YA fantasy that really surprised me how much I liked it. It has a medical magic system that I thought was really fun and interesting. I really liked our main character in the first book, Nika. I thought that she had a really interesting personality because she's kind of abrasive and really focused on her own survival in a way that I thought was very believable for the world that she lives in, and I liked the way that she grew throughout the story. I liked the friendships that she created, the relationships she built with other characters. I liked that the villain really committed to his villainous plot, and that Vanessa Lee really committed to making the ending dark. I thought that was a well-done aspect of the book, so I'm excited to see how that's going to continue on in His Mortal Demise, because the end of the first book just really alters the world state in an interesting way, and I want to see where everything is going to go from there, because I don't know what direction it could go from there. Next up, we have The Tomb of Dragons by Catherine Addison. This is the 3rd and final book in the Cemeteries of Amalo series, which is a spin-off of The Goblin Emperor. I loved the first 2 books in the series, which are The Witness for the Dead and something of The Grief of Stones, I think is the second one. I don't know why that title is escaping me at the moment. But this one, my best friend read right when it came out, and she actually didn't like the way the series concluded. She's the one that got me to read The Goblin Emperor in the first place. And the reasons that she didn't like it are things that I think are also going to bother me, so I've kind of been putting it off now, and I need to not do that because otherwise I will simply never read it. And I want to finish it up so that she and I can actually talk about the reasons that she didn't like it, and I'm curious to see if I end up feeling the same way. And our final sequel is one that's a sequel for a book that I read all the way back in high school. So this would have been 2014, 2015. But I've got The Dante Chamber by Matthew Pearl, which is the sequel to The Dante Club. The Dante Club is set in America, and it's following the first American English translation of Dante's Inferno, and the kind of writers and poets that are working on that together get involved in investigating a series of murders that follow punishments from Dante's Inferno. This sequel is doing a similar thing, except this set of murders is going to be based on Purgatorio, and it's set in England instead of Boston. So I'm curious to see where this is going to go. It looks like we have one recurring character, or 1 or 2 recurring characters from that original group of people involved with the investigation in the first book, and some new characters also getting involved, and they're all actual historical literary figures. I believe Christina Rossetti is the main character of this one, so I'm really curious to see how I feel about this. 1, because it's been a very long time since I read the first book, and 2, I'm a little concerned it might end up being repetitive, because it's the same idea, but now we're looking at Purgatorio instead of Inferno. So I'm hopeful that I'll end up enjoying this as much as I liked the first book. The first book really kicked off an interest in Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy for me. I actually bought a copy of the Divine Comedy that was the original American English translation and used it to write a paper when I was in my senior year of high school. So I'm hoping that I'll love this one just as much as I love the Dante Club, but again, I'm just a little worried it might be kind of repetitive like I'm being right now. Moving on to our second category, we have books I bought this year that I'm afraid might languish if I don't prioritize them. And the first one I want to talk about is actually not in the physical stack here. It's Death in the Spires by KJ Charles. This is one that my best friend read and then immediately gifted me the ebook because she wanted me to read it too. I started it, I was having a great time, but I was one, slumping, and two, about to start Reindeer Readathon, so I kind of set it aside just so that I wouldn't like do the book a disservice by reading it at a time when I was not mentally prepared or in the mood to be reading it. So I set it aside, and I want to make sure that it doesn't just like sit on my Kindle forever. So I want to prioritize this one in the new year so that I can talk to my friend about it because she really loved this particular historical mystery. After that, we've got Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is a fantasy romance that I've heard excellent things about, and I love T. Kingfisher's writing, but I haven't actually branched out beyond her horror. So I'm wanting to read more of her other books this year, more of her fantasy books, and I think this could be a good place for me to start. I'm also typically kind of picky about fantasy romance, so I'm wanting to branch out a little bit and find more fantasy romance authors that I actually like. And I think that T. Kingfisher, because I know I already like her characters and her writing style, I think that could be a really safe bet for me. But I also, because I'm picky about fantasy romance, I tend to avoid reading it. So again, I just don't want this one to languish because I'm putting it off because this is a genre that I'm not usually that into. Another one from the same friend who gifted me Death in the Spires is A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. She talked me into buying this when we were at Barnes & Noble one day. This was a series that she read, I think, kind of back to back. She read it quite quickly. It's about a woman who is like in a sort of, is it 18th or 19th? I think 19th century inspired world. And she goes around the world studying dragons, and that sounds super fun to me, but my friend said that she loved it, and she was like, if you like Jane Austen, you're gonna like this, and I love Jane Austen. So I'm convinced she's never yet been wrong about a book that she said that she thought I would like, so I like completely trust her recommendation. I'm just really bad about getting to her recommendations in a timely manner. So this is the year I'm really trying to change that. And our final book on this list was one that my partner's parents gifted to me for my birthday this year, and I meant to read it at the start of the year, and it just didn't happen. But we have The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, which is a horror novel that I've heard excellent things about. Generally, I've heard really great things about Tananarive Due, and so she's an author I've been wanting to try for a while, and I just think that the premise of this one sounded super interesting. So I want to go ahead and read it and hopefully find another horror author that I love, because I'm always excited to find a new author whose backlist I can just like dig into. And now our final section is the random backlist books off of my own TBR. And I thought this was a really interesting selection. So let's go to Past Hope and see what I pulled, and then we'll talk about it. We're gonna pick the random selections for my priority TBR. So shake it all up. And I'm just going to pull out 4, and then we'll open them instead of doing them one at a time. I think that's going to be easier, so I can actually like set this thing down. Make sure I get a hold of 1. Or is this? I think that's 1. Sometimes they stick together a little bit in here because of the way I folded them. I was wrong. It's 2. Okay, so we have 2 selected already. And then 3. And 1 from this side. 4. Got a tall one. Okay, so first of our random selections is going to be Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. I love how, there we go. There we go. Second random selection will be The Stardust Grail by Yume Kitase. Third one, ooh, Assassin's Blade by, if it'll. Okay, it really doesn't want to focus on that one, but just know that it's Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. And then finally, we have, this is a long one. Oh, that's a dense book. In the Wake on Blackness and Being. Okay, so I thought this was an interesting selection because we start off strong with some fantasy and sci-fi, which are genres I'm wanting to get more back into in 2026, if that makes sense. I feel like over the last couple of years, I've really gravitated more towards horror and mystery, but I found myself really like in a sci-fi and fantasy mood lately, so I'm wanting to kind of dive back into those genres. So we started off strong with Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. This is a sort of a sci-fantasy from what I can gather on the back. I think it's leaning more towards fantasy, but it sounds really interesting about these two siblings who end up on opposite sides of a like very large scale conflict. Heard great things about Django Wexler, but this has been sitting on my shelves forever, so this was a really great backlist pick from the bag. And then we got The Stardust Grail by Yume Kitase, which I just bought recently. I think I bought it at the tail end of 2024 maybe, or did I buy it this year? In 2025. I don't actually remember. I bought it fairly recently though, and I just think it sounds cool. It's like a sci-fi heist novel, and I think it sounds like a lot of fun. This one though, again, just haven't been reading a lot of sci-fi, so I feel like this is going to be a really great way to like dip my toes back into sci-fi and start reading more of it again. So that was like two really strong picks from the bag. And then we got Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. This is the like novella collection that goes along with the Throne of Glass series, and it can be read as the first book, but I've generally heard that the experience is better if you read it later on in the series between like Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows. So in pulling this, I'm kind of obligating myself to read the Throne of Glass series in 2026. That's fine though, I should get to those anyway. That's something that's been languishing on my shelves for quite a while. My mom gave me the box set like several years ago now for Christmas, so I'm not mad about pulling this. It just was a little unexpected because I was kind of thinking about reading the series this upcoming year anyway, but like now we gotta. We have to. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what she does with a larger cast. I know this series came before ACOTAR, which is the other series I've read from this author. I'm curious to see how I feel about it because I know there's very mixed feelings on this series. I don't really have anything else to say about it. And finally, we got In the Wake on Blackness in Being by Christina Sharp. And this was a theory book I bought for a course I was taking a few years ago. Maybe it wasn't a few years ago. Maybe it was 2024. It just feels like it's been a really long time ago. But I was taking this course in 2024 that was Materialist Feminisms. Really great course. I really learned a lot there. But this was a book that I picked up because there was a chapter in it that I knew was going to be useful for a project I was working on. And so I read like the first, I don't know, couple of chapters of the book and then set it down because I really needed to focus on finishing that project, and I just never circled my way back around to reading the rest of it. But it's a really interesting book, and I feel like probably the Goodreads description can explain it better than I can ever potentially explain it. So let me just bring that up. Okay. So it says, in this original and trenchant work, Christina Sharp interrogates literary, visual, cinematic, and quotidian representations of Black life that comprise what she calls the orthography of the wake. Activating multiple registers of wake, the path behind a ship, keeping watch with the dead, coming to consciousness, Sharp illustrates how Black lives are swept up and animated by the afterlives of slavery, and she delineates what survives despite such insistent violence and negation. So it was a really interesting book. I remember reading it and thinking that Sharp's writing was really poignant and incisive. So I feel like it's going to be a really interesting book to return to. It just wasn't what I was expecting to come out of the bag. So it's kind of cool to get that little twist right at the end of my priority TBR list. I'm actually pretty excited to go back to this one and see how I feel about it, rereading the first chunk of it now, and then actually like digging further into Sharp's ideas. So that is my priority TBR for 2026. Let me know down in the comments below what you're planning to read next year. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.